Hi, everyone, and welcome to HBR Quarantined. I'm Adi Ignatius, the editor-in-chief of Harvard Business Review, and my co-host is Josh Mocht, who heads product and innovation for the company. We started this program maybe 6 or 7 weeks ago to be a forum to discuss issues related to COVID-19, how they were affecting business, how they were affecting the world of work. We've expanded that some to also talk about the latest big national conversation that's happening in the U.S. in particular about race and equality. Today, we are going to pivot a little bit and really talk about business. As businesses start or continue the process of reopening, we want to talk about what that's like. So we have a special guest this week, Jesper Brodin, who is the CEO of Ingka Group, which oversees Ikea. So we're going to bring him in a little bit and talk about what it's like for one of the most beloved brands in the world as it begins to reopen around the world. I want to talk just a little bit, though, about the phenomenon of reopening. I spoke to a friend in New York City today who said it feels like the city is reemerging and starting to feel like its old self. I mentioned that because New York was, of course, the epicenter of the pandemic in the U.S. More than 200,000 people tested positive in New York City. More than 20,000 have died, either confirmed with COVID-19 or probable. But the tide seems to have turned. Positive rates are on the decline. Yesterday was the start of phase 1 of New York's reopening. Construction sites, manufacturing businesses, wholesale supply chain businesses, retail, both curbside and in-store pickup, all kind of reopened. So safety protocols remain in place, and this is just phase 1, but it's potentially a big milestone as society, as the economy starts to move back into normalcy. So, Josh, I want to ask you about your perspective. You're up in Boston, which I think is beginning phase 2 of its reopening.
Yep. I think Boston's slowly reemerging as well. I mean, got my hair cut. That was kind of interesting. I went to a main street in around where I live and noticed that cars were actually parked in front of stores, which I hadn't really seen so much of before. Stores were open. Restaurants had doors wide open. You could sense, there's something percolating at the same time. Just talking with friends who work downtown or in different places, there's a little bit of traffic coming back, but it does seem like a slow process. And I guess everybody just has that comfort level, and you get the sense that we're all like, this is going to get back. Like, we're going to get back somewhere, but you still have that, like, when or how, it's just still has that murky sense of, we're still in the midst of something, but all the positive signs, we'll take them.
Yep, absolutely. So let me introduce our guest who will join us. Again, this is Jesper Brodin, who's the CEO of the Sweden-based Ingka Group, which oversees Ikea. If you just joined us, this is HBR Quarantine. I would urge any viewers to join us in the conversation. If you have questions for Jesper, please introduce them. He began his career as a purchase manager for Ikea in Pakistan. He's been at the company for more than 20 years, and he's been CEO for the past 3 years. He also serves as an assistant to Ikea's legendary founder, Ingvar Kamprad, and to the then CEO, Anders Dalvig. I think we have a picture of an opening in the UK, so you get a sense of what it can look like as a company reopens. So huge crowds, huge pent-up demand, and you get a sense of the social distancing that is happening. Ikea, this is a brand that is beloved, that has a special place in our hearts. We all know the jokes, the tropes, the idea that marriages are broken up in its showrooms. We laugh at our own ineptitude in trying to put together the Billy bookcases. And if you look at the internet, there are a lot of Ikea jokes. Here's one that I can actually say is sort of a dad joke, Ikea joke. Going to my son's room is like going to Ikea. I just go to have a look, and I come out with 6 glasses, 4 plates, 3 towels, and a ton of meatballs. But the fact is, Ikea produces the chic and affordable furniture that can be found nearly everywhere, definitely in my home. As I said, it's one of the most beloved companies. Interbrand last year ranked IKEA very high, number 26 of all brands in the world. So the last thing I want to show, a quick TikTok video that shows how people are creative with IKEA things, including those blue bags that you carry your stuff in. So welcome from Sweden, Jesper Brodin. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So let me ask you, so let's talk about COVID-19 and its effect on your global business. Maybe let's start with the pre-reopening moment. You know, how many stores were closed and how did you survive the worst period?
Well, it's been absolutely the most strange period, of course, that anybody can remember, from realizing during the days, basically COVID was contained in China, to realizing the pandemic and then acting on closures. So we had actually 90% of our stores closed at the worst days. And of course, having in the old business model, 90% of our revenue cut out is something that nobody could ever dream of. So that was the rock bottom.
That's oh my gosh, that sounds just crazy. You know, when you think about the experience of going to the stores, and we can talk a little bit about how you're choosing to reopen, but I'm really curious about the experience of retail, because so much of the experience in a way is communal. When you go to IKEA, you're all together and touching things, and it's based on, closeness to a large extent. Do you think we're going to see sort of fundamentally just reimagining of the retail experience coming out of this?
It's an interesting question that I think it's going to be, we need a bit of track record to understand the history when we're in it, right? But if I would take a guess at this moment, the transformation that we were already into, where we saw digital and services shifting the way we access people and serve people, we were already into that, you can say. But interesting enough, during these months that we have behind us now, our online share, which was a humble 10-11% before the crisis, was actually up 7 times at peaks, which shows that in spite of the pleasure of being together in an IKEA store, there is also the necessity, of course, in life at home of to start with a lot of needs in working from home. A week after, the whole cooking wave came from us, where people realized that they actually had to become better chefs at home. So the online was moving, and we will most likely see an IKEA that has taken market shares and expanded as we have responded to that demand. We hope that people will still enjoy and come back to our stores. And definitely when we see the opening, that had been a surprise for us, how quickly people came back to basically visit us.
Yeah, talk more about how you decide, what's your threshold for deciding when to reopen stores, how to reopen stores. I think I'm right, correct me if I'm wrong, that even as New York has started to reopen, I don't think you've reopened your Brooklyn store.
So we haven't opened. I'm not fully updated on the Brooklyn store in particular, but we are taking steps by steps, and from the closures to the discussions in between to the opening has been a close collaboration with authorities, which has been, I think, overall phenomenal around the world. Where parties have, I think, authorities, companies, unions have come together in order to save jobs, to make sure safety is a priority for people and so on. So it's been fairly straightforward, both the decision to open and close, but the operational aspects of it is absolutely humongous task that we've been standing before across this. And when it comes to safety measures, it's not only about caring for people, right? It's about our ticket to remain open. So thereby we said we will try to be perfect in how we implement the best of standards in order to not only give people that sense, but also make sure that it's a good place to come.
Yeah, it sounds like a huge amount of thought and process goes into figuring that out. at the same time that you're doing that, there's this backdrop, I think, where CEOs today are expected to engage on some of the big issues, and we're certainly seeing those things emerge right before our eyes, and we're talking about a whole range of issues, and CEOs definitely are asked, to have their opinions and speak for their companies. I'm curious how you decide what are the issues that you're really going to engage on, or when you might be silent on something.
Well, I believe Ikea is one of the companies who is truly guided by a vision. So we are foundation owned, and we have a long legacy with that goes back to not only the 75 years we've been around, but back in the 70s, we formulated the vision of Ikea, and once and for all decided to be for the many people. And I think in a way, ever since we have been guided by that vision, and it's been, I think, escalating the last decade, saying that except for serving people with affordable furniture in life at home, we have been looking at our total value chain and been into all sorts of moral and ethical questions to how do we actually run a company long term, both to protect the future of the company, but also doing what's right. And then obviously, you can say it's big topics, but it's about people and planet. So the whole climate topic, which is a crisis that won't wait for Covid-19, but is emerging, is high on the agenda, as well as, of course, the equality topics that has been rising the last weeks due to the events in the US and around the globe these days.
I want to remind viewers, submit questions of your own. This is HBR Quarantine. We are interviewing the CEO of the group that controls Ikea, Jesper Brodin. So join the conversation. Jesper, you mentioned the racial inequality issue. I'd love to hear. I mean, this is a moment where I think companies are reckoning with their lack of progress. Maybe they've said the right things and even tried to do the right things, but have acknowledged they have not done the right things in recent years, decades even. So it's a moment when companies are really seriously rethinking what they're doing in terms of diversity and inclusion. I know you're based in Sweden, you're not in the US, which is the epicenter of this conversation now, but I'm sure you're thinking about, okay, what is the response that Ikea, which has a big presence in the US and a big presence globally, what is the response and that you need to make, that you want to make now?
Yeah, very good. I think when I started in Ikea back in the 90s, actually, I think I was a young manager at that time, and I observed how it was the emerging topic of what is the responsibility of a company. And I believe that previously it was thought that governments and authorities run the society, and companies are isolated to their activities. But through sourcing topics, we realized that we need to have a point of view. We need to drive an agenda where ethics are flavoring everything we do. Now, my predecessor, Anders, who you mentioned before, already back in 2000, launched, I think, a quite strong campaign for diversity. What Ikea did those days was to zoom in on gender equality, where we are one of the companies who are unfortunately quite unique, being in a 50-50 position when it comes to gender equality. But obviously, the equality agenda has flavored our statements and positions on ethnicity, racial background, and making strong statements when it comes to being profoundly against any sort of discriminatory behavior. We are currently, due to the latest event, looking ourselves in the mirror. Are we doing enough? I believe we are doing a lot, but the question is, are we doing enough in those things to decide, to voice, and to make sure we create preconditions for the future that we want to see. And we are, by the way, inspired by the 10 commitments that you recently launched in HBR as well, where I think we tick some of the boxes, but not all.
The interesting thing about your company is that people really do love it. And I wonder, and we can sort of pivot here to talk about how the company evolves, but there is a strong affinity. So I'm wondering, does that make changes more difficult for you, or how does that factor in?
I think possibly so. It's success is always a challenge, right? When you want to develop, because it can become the biggest sleeping pill. What I think is the interesting and important part is that we are in such a fast-moving world that our concept and our past may not have all the answers for the future. And so how do you lead in a world where you need to bring a profound understanding of your legacy, of your DNA, be really clear on your uniqueness? You could place some topics in the history book, but you need to be clear on what are the things that's going to profoundly make you the company of tomorrow. And then you look at the space of exploration, which is important to protect to a certain degree. So both financially and with patience, because new ideas are fragile. So how do you allow yourself to explore, and how do you have a calculated risk at the same time as you build on your strengths? So I would say the danger would be to be average of those two, but be even more resilient, be even more on your clarity of your legacy, and be even stronger on your entrepreneurship. Is probably moving forward.
Yes, but just as a follow-up, because we publish, on this notion of the founder's mentality, and for you guys, that seems to be, with such an amazing origin story of how this thing comes in. But is there a bit of that you consciously try and hold on to that spirit of the founder that actually drove you to innovate in the first place?
I think so. It is an interesting thing. Our founder here wrote a testament. It's called The Testament of a Furniture Dealer back in 1976. And typically being him, and typical, I think, for many entrepreneurs like him, there is a strong vision and a very sharp business idea. And then there's nothing, no strategy, no plans, no policies, but then straight over to values. And ever since, I think Ikea has been strong on value drive, and entrepreneurship, testing new things, being in renewal is one of them. Mm-hmm. And you can say sometimes, of course, you wonder, are these values alive? And during this crisis, during the COVID crisis, I can say one of the reasons why we've been successful is because of that. And what I didn't know before is the speed of having a value-based organization, because what we've done has partly not been dictated or steered from the top, but really been people unleashing activities and doing the right thing at the same time. And that takes some confidence and some culture, I think.
So we're getting some great questions from our viewers. Keep them coming. But I'm going to ask you a couple, and they're people want to know more about digital transformation and digital possibilities. So here are a couple. This is Tim from London. Could Ikea ever see a future of fewer stores and more digital VR experiences to help customers select the essentials from home? And then related, Ankita from Hyderabad, India, who asks, we all know that people value the ability to come into the store and imagine the look, but as of now, how can that work? Digitally, can you give the same impact as the physical store? Are you considering 3D models? So two similar questions about future technology.
So these are two it's good. It's London and Hyderabad. We actually call it Hydra Good after we open our store because it's been phenomenal. Okay. But we are...
Another dad joke.
We're having these questions are, I think they are absolutely relevant. And in our transformation, and this is, of course, pre-corona, we realized that our former model holds a great value. And we believe a lot that our stores will be as relevant tomorrow. So we see, for instance, that before, again, the corona, which is, of course, an extreme incident, but we've been able to welcome more people to our stores the last years, in spite of digital disruption going on. Now, what people have told us is that they want to come and they want to experience the physical, full IKEA range. They might come for the meatballs, but they definitely also come for the instant gratification of being able to pick up the goods straight away. But then again, on a Tuesday afternoon when kids are put to bed and it's late and you're on the market for 4 chairs on the table, how do we show up? And to the questions even more, how do we not only offer stuff to sell, but how can we actually provide competence in life at home? And that's why many of the latest digital acquisitions we have done and development is heading towards a place where I think in only a year or two, we will provide a very strong environment where you can, through VR, through augmented reality, access more and more of support to how you actually make your life at home better.
Yep. So let me go to another question, and I love how international our audience is today. This is Camogello from Johannesburg, who asks, how is your supply chain recovering? How is that impacting the reopening of your stores?
Mhm.
For both for the furniture and the meatballs.
Well, it's been deliciously complicated, I must say. It's to run a supply chain like we do with a global footprint, where we basically work with optimal sourcing. We have suppliers in Europe, America, Asia. Sometimes, of course, if you can imagine the network of sub-suppliers, it's a complex thing. We were amazed by our capability to take quick decisions early on in China. And I think thanks to the excellent work with our supply chain and the suppliers working for Ikea in China, we were a bit on our toes when the pandemic came to Europe. And that means we have been able to take good decisions on stopping, tough decisions early on. We've been, of course, relocating goods. We had to speed up a little bit as the online share took off stronger than we had planned, actually, or what we could imagine. And right now, to be honest, we are running faster because of indexes in our home markets, like in Germany, where we are on all-time high, both visitation and sales, which is something, to be honest, we are still trying to figure out how that happened, as we expected a gradual return to the market, but it's gone very fast.
Jesper, you have a reputation around experimenting and innovation, and so I'm curious. I mean, anything you want to share with us would be great about kind of things to come that you're experimenting with now, or even stories of things that you may have learned from experiments that just didn't go as planned, but at least you learned something from it.
Yeah. How many hours do we have, Josh, to? I think we try to encourage doing mistakes. Sometimes it becomes a bit of a cliche, and that you want to do it, but you have to understand the fundamental reasons of fear of making mistakes. I think that's one thing I learned. Secondly, I think you need to protect ideas. Because they are fragile. It's so easy with the glasses of experience to shoot down a new idea. And finally, you need to make sure you finance your ideation and creation. And without those things, I think there is too little oxygen for the new things to grow. Mm-hmm. And then I think personally, to cut down on the academics and the strategies, and to work with people that are hands-on has been a bit of IKEA success in the past. People who are capable of turning their ideas to something tangible are the ones most successful. And then I learned over the years also that it's a benefit to be a bit naive, consciously naive maybe even, because normally if you understand the trouble down the road, you would hesitate to try your new ideas. So I think we have done, since the flat packs and such, I think some of the latest thing is we spoke about click furniture. Mm-hmm. Switching from assembling furniture to actually clicking furniture together, which has a lot of benefits in saving time, making it easier, but also sustainability. And then if I take a total other example, the Home Smart range in IKEA now integrating light and sound in an affordable way with also partners like Sonos has been phenomenal. And finally, as a third one, I would say the new IKEA alternative to the meatballs that will be launched somewhere around August to December, I think, around the world, will be also a beautiful proof point of sustainability.
With something like, just to be following up on that, with something like the Sonos partnership, did those things happen organically in the company, or is there just a set unit looking for how to create new things through partnership?
Well, some things do happen organically, and I think we are, the last years, we've tried to really stimulate that through co-creation platforms where we learn from the best, from Lego, from other companies out there, and it works. So you build a culture of entrepreneurship with, as in our case, 166,000 people, and it stimulates also a way of challenging the known, which is healthy. In this case, it's a unit in Sweden who worked with product development, and it's been, I think, part of a conscious strategy since a couple of years to explore, I would say, two new areas for us in Life at Home. One being the digital smart offer, and the other one being the sustainable, and sometimes they overlap. And these are young in the Ikea range and development, but I think we will see a lot of good solution coming the coming decade.
So I've got a question from Michael from, of all places, Stockholm, who says, Jesper spoke about value-based management in times of crisis. He's wondering, how do you actually involve employees and customers in finding solutions to the new COVID-related challenges?
I think it's a good question, Mikael in Stockholm, and I think probably we could do a better job in engaging, in particular, customers more in the future. Historically, we were limited, but today we are not. The digital new arenas creates a lot of opportunities for us to not only interact with the customers in an easy way, but also do it in mass if we like to. So we launched about a year ago our co-creation platform that I referred to previously, and that helps us both with customers and co-workers to post problems and let people basically take a stab at with ideas on how to solve it. And I think we are slowly and gradually figuring out how we can turn that into ideas and take steps in reality to actually not only make it an ideas exercise, but actually a movement.
So here's another question. This is from Mark in Lebanon, who is really, asking the question about the risk of a second wave or a further wave of COVID-19. And, obviously as a business, you don't want to be responsible for that. Governments don't want to be responsible for that, but there is risk. So the question is really, how do you manage that risk, especially when you're aware that if things go wrong, you could shoulder the blame for that?
So I think we were quite early on setting up our scenario planning, and we've been working, of course, and observing a lot of other good companies and organizations in trying to figure out what's the possible scenarios. So as part of the more red scenario on this is double dips, triple dips of pandemics, and possibly also not being in denial that this might not be the last time we see a pandemic. So on one hand, we have the scenarios, and we know the consequences much better today, what that would mean for us. And we are also then clear on what type of actions we need to take. What I think is even more important than for us to address than a pandemic is the climate crisis, which is not only around the corner, it's here. And with all the respect of the human suffering and the economic damage of Corona, we believe that the climate crisis has even bigger challenges for us as mankind. So this is a decade when we need to come together and not only lead with thoughts together, but actually lead with actions on how do we mitigate and turn the tides on climate.
Yeah, actually, could you talk a little more about your own climate change initiatives and where you are prioritizing that?
I think it's been an agenda that has been growing for us from an understanding, and we see three reasons really why this is a topic that we don't discuss anymore. We're working with actions on how to mitigate. The first one is that we have a very steep increase of demands and expectations from both co-workers and customers. It's quite extreme how it's developed over the last years. That enough, I think, is a reason. The third reason would be it's the right thing to do. But the middle reason, which I think, and I'd like to underline, is that because a lot of companies and a lot of authorities have got it wrong, and that is seeing climate work as a premium or an additional investment or something that would cost more for customers. While in our studies, when we look at it, with all the respect for that, it's a complex topic. It is the new normal and the new way to low cost, the new way of designing the value chain for smartness and for low cost. It is a matter of timing sometimes in investment, that is true. But if you look at a lot of the things that we've been engaging in now, hollow constructions, renewable energy, EV deliveries, veggie balls instead of meatball, etc., they are part of building the new economy. So it is in our interest serving the many people within wallets to, as quickly as possible, also go for climate smart.
Yeah.
Part of, because the group itself invests in a fair amount of different things and housing and a range of things, robotics and other things. Is that part of what ties together your investments, thinking about more sustainable ways of living?
It is. On one side, you can say we're using our balance sheet. And to a certain extent, you can say it's about addressing your scope 1, 2, and 3 impact. And it is a respectful job to go scope 3 for any company, I think. And that's what our plan is, basically, to go for climate positive in 2030. We don't want to go to 2040 or 50. We want to try to address our ambitions in the here and now, and not postpone to the next generation. It's going to be difficult, but we already have some proof point with being climate positive when it comes to investments in renewable energy for our stores, shopping centers, DCs, etc. Last year was actually the first time we managed to prove that it's possible to turn the trends. We had a 5% plus growth, and we had a minus, in absolute terms, a minus 4.3, I think, in CO2. So again, lots of humbleness and big respect for the future, but it's important to believe, and then it's important, I think, to roll up the sleeves and make the right investments.
Yeah, that's an amazing result. I want to ask you about the brand perception of Ikea some more, because people have a complex relationship with it. I mean, I think it's a brand that represents energy and fun, whatever. But, then there are the tropes that people get lost in the showroom, that couples, break up arguing in the showroom, people agonizing as they're putting together their Ektorp sofas. Are you okay with that sort of mixed, complex brand reception? Does that all add up to a successful brand image for IKEA?
That's a good question. So on behalf of my predecessor, I apologize for. No, I think I think all brands that stand for uniqueness somehow, of course, have an impact on people. It's true. I think in the past and possibly today also, we can still do a better job in certain areas, and we should continue to be ambitious about serving everybody. But at the same time, we are a concept where it's important for us to side with the many people within wallets. We decided that once and for all, and affordability is one of the things that is truly holy for us. And that built into that model is really a strive where customers are part of creating the value. So we do one part and customers do one part, and then together we save money. Now, some of our customers have also lately said that from time to time they disagree with us. And that means we have now, the last years, been moving into ways of serving people beyond the core model, which is the store and the do-it-yourself, by adding services, through acquisitions like TaskRabbit in the US, through reaching out digitally 24/7 in new ways with the Ikea app and so forth. So I think we're getting better to also serve people who want to be served, and then give them that alternative.
Well, it's also, I mean, it's probably a bit of a double-edged sword. I remember seeing a game show once where, the challenge for the couple was to put together IKEA furniture and for us to watch and see them kill each other. And, I mean, on the one hand,
it's not that difficult.
You're asking the wrong guy, but basically, it sort of seems like, to your point, like, I think being true to your brand on the one hand, but on the other, the publicity and the way it proliferated. There's a good side to even a story like that, watching something that may feel a little bit negative in some ways. Yeah, no, but I think for us and for me, brand building of the 80s or maybe even 90s, where it was maybe partly about creating an image of something. I think today and going forward, it's about who you truly are, and which means also that hopefully your customers and communities will forgive you for your mistakes from time to time. But the true intentions of a company and a brand, what it represents, is what you should build your strengths on. And then obviously, if you're lucky enough to find uniqueness in that, then you're probably building something stronger. We are the kind of people who like to lower the price of umbrellas when it's raining as a symbolic act to side with people, and much more. But I do believe uniqueness shouldn't be built as a gimmick, but it should be built on what you actually want to achieve. And for us, it is ultimately about trying to make life at home better for people within wallets.
Yeah. So Jesper, you've anticipated this next question, but this is the last question we're going to take, and this is from Sushmita from Mumbai. And I guess it's, what else can you say about the secret sauce behind IKEA's creative approach?
Okay, well, I think there is actually, for those who are interested, there is a very ambitious design formula behind IKEA's products. And so far I haven't come across any more ambitious formula. It's a pentagon that basically expresses that in every given product we should try to have beautiful form. Then we have a point of view from a Scandinavian perspective and a uniqueness, simplicity, and so forth. That functionally, as a second part, that is really built for the purpose. There are a lot of beautiful chairs that you can sit on, but our chairs should be really comfortable and ergonomic. Then you move to quality, that you build things that is really built for real homes and real families, that you can wash your covers in your sofas because kids will jump in them, etc. Sustainability is the new kid on the block, both in how your value chain looks like and the purpose of the product at home. And if you take all of these four and try to bake that into one product, it's hard enough. And if you then add the aspect of trying to reach people within wallets, then it becomes really difficult. And that means cutting corners or compromising is not going to work. It's about engineering and working with really smart people from different disciplines to try to design the products. And on our good days, we think we have a couple of proof that that's possible.
For sure.
So Jesper, I think the final phase of reopening will be when we feel comfortable throwing our kids in the plastic ball pit again at IKEA.
Yeah.
I hope that's soon. Jesper, I want to thank you for being here. We had a lot of audience engagement, a lot of great questions from the people viewing, and that's because they're interested in this concept of reopening, and they're interested in how a company like IKEA is handling that. So thanks very much for being here.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
And thanks so much for everyone joining us, all your questions, and for listening in on what was a great conversation around a pretty innovative company and at a most interesting time. We look forward to seeing you again next week, next Monday. We'll be back at Monday at noon. And thank you all for coming to the show.
Right, and if you're still here, here is our special behind-the-scenes post-mortem
discussion. Yeah. Although, and if you're still tuned in, yeah, we know we're live. Yeah, thank you for your notes. But you might have noticed that we didn't announce that we have a mystery guest next week.
Well, we do have a mystery guest. We don't know who our guest is. We have a couple of great possibilities, and as soon as we confirm, we will go public with that mystery guest.
Yeah, exactly. So stay tuned.
So I thought that was interesting. I mean, this is an interesting company. It is so much, Josh, as you were implying. You go to IKEA so you can lie down in the bed and jump around on the chairs, and this moment it challenges that business model, but it's interesting. They're trying to get back there. I mean, while they're going more digital, they also realize the value of that if and when it comes back. So it's a very interesting little case study.
Yeah, and from a product innovation point of view, it's fascinating that we didn't totally dive into what we talked with Jesper about before the show, just trying to come up with that furniture to take the 6-hour process down to 25 minutes. I mean, that's, if they come up with things like that and continue to move forward along with the affordability and all the core values, you really can see how a brand like that continues to proliferate, both, with real retail and digital.
Who does put together the IKEA furniture in your family?
Julia, do you put together?
I put together all the furniture in my apartment that my roommates buy, that I buy. I have a toolkit, and they know to come to me. They'll let me know, hey, I ordered a chair, or I ordered a bookcase. Are you doing anything? Can I buy some takeout for you and let you go nuts? And it's relaxing to me. I really like it.
You enjoy this. I just had a feeling I just had a feeling that this is something you would. That I find.
I will say I've never had any trouble putting together a piece of furniture from IKEA. There's been one. I've had one issue with some like assemblable furniture, and it wasn't from IKEA. So
you should have talked to him about the one issue.
It wasn't from IKEA though. It was from a different company. So
so it's interesting. When we were talking to Jesper before the show started, I was saying I'm the person who does it in our family, and it usually works out, but occasionally I have some colossal mistake. And he asked me something like, well, do you look at the directions? And I said, well, kind of. And he said their research shows that women follow the instructions far more effectively than men, which is to the surprise of nobody. But apparently, if you follow the instructions, it works.
Yeah, that is a lesson I learned from my father, though. So, he would like to read the directions, and I also always double check to make sure that I have all the parts before I start. And I do like, okay, do I have 6 of this screw? Yep. Okay. Do I have that? Just so it's like, because the most frustrating thing I think would be to get halfway in and you're doing so well, and then you realize that, or even, to make sure that you know what place they're in. So this, half of the screws that you need haven't rolled under the couch or something, and then you're fishing around for them under there. So yeah, if you need anything assembled,
well, maybe when we all get back in the office, we'll, do one of these competitions. And
absolutely. I put that hammock up pretty well.
That's true. You did in my cube. That was, you're right. You are pretty handy.
Yeah, do what I can.
All right. Well, I'd love to chat, but we have to find our guest for next week. So
yeah,
great. We'll see if we can get the best person.
Okay.
Wait and see. Is it the real goodbye?
This is real goodbye.
Real goodbye.
All right.
Okay.